and the next minute I'd shot out of the top of my body and was traveling through different planes. So it felt as though as I was rising up, I was taking off a layer of clothing and really just vibrating quicker is probably the only way I could describe it, or
Mm.
becoming purer. Hard to describe. It's funny, I've just looked at my clock, it's 2:22. Literally on the digital clock there.
Ben Smith, it's a pleasure to be with you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to meet you.
A pleasure to meet you too. Yeah, I'm delighted that you're here. I'm familiar with your content, and the thing I like about your content is the integrity I feel that comes through the way you speak. It's not too highfalutin or what I would call like spiritual performance, but
Yeah,
it's from the heart. How does that sound to you? Does that sound a good assessment?
I hope so. I guess I would probably describe myself as a simple person, and my life is quite simple. And I think I like things described in a simple way. And
Mm.
so that is naturally, I suppose, how I try to share my thoughts and my ideas and insights and things. So hopefully that sort of resonates with people that are looking for that simple guidance as well.
And simplicity is profound because there's that saying that if you can't explain something, for example, to a child, then you don't really understand it. And I used to work for Radio One back in the day, and it was really emphasized to be able to explain things in that simple way. And you realize it's harder than
Mm.
sounding, complex in a way.
Yeah. Oh God, it really is. Yeah, it really is. And you definitely find with teaching, it develops you because, like, precisely as you say, you have to sort of figure things out in your mind and dissect them to such an extent where it's then possible for you to teach it in a simple way that you grow just by the fact that you're actually having to go into more depth to teach it. So
Mm.
it's been amazing actually from the perspective of a teacher. Sometimes you don't feel like the teacher because you're learning so much every time you have to teach something. It's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the beautiful thing actually about teaching from a place of integrity is walking the path. It's not that you've finished the path, is it? It's you're walking the path and kind of inviting people to go along with you, which I think is the healthiest stance. And you've been meditating for an awfully long time since you were 6 years old, brought to
Hmm.
it by your father, which is a rare stroke of fortune.
Yeah, I've got a lot to thank him for, really, haven't I? Yeah, it was quite an interesting upbringing, I guess. Which probably like anyone that's been brought up in my household wasn't religious by any means. It was meditation and spiritual concepts, but it wasn't religious as such. But I guess people that have been brought up in a faith of some sort probably have this same feeling of like it's just normalized to you. So it was
Mm.
quite normalized that there were pictures of different saints and sages and amazing people littered around the house. And my dad had a little shrine room, and he used to talk me through how to meditate and how to breathe and how to do these different things, which at the time I probably found a little bit boring and not too interesting. But thankfully he similar to me explains things, I think, in quite a pragmatic way,
Mm.
and that's probably where I've got it from. And it made it easy for me to understand the value in it. And although I didn't understand it to any great depth at that age, I still understood that it was something useful, and it was delivered in a way that I found inspiring, I think. So it came through martial arts initially. He learnt through a teacher at his martial arts school, and I found that really interesting. And that was like a gateway in, that if he just said, let's sit in this room and do this meditation technique, I would have been like, can we not just play football? Can we not do
Yeah.
something fun? So he was he was the perfect person really to actually teach me and inspire me.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, having that little bit of extra something to make it interesting to a young mind in that way. And at what
Mm.
point then did it really embed for you in terms of obviously now it's what you do. You talk about it on your YouTube channel. You help students and people with meditation and spiritual inquiry. So
Mm.
at what point then did it really sort of seep into your bones in that way and become a path that you wanted to fully walk in that way?
Yeah, I would say the transition happened some point in my early 20s, mid to early 20s, where I started to feel like this is something that I want to share. There was a period, probably like every single person on earth, pretty much between like 16 and disregarded anything that was useful and just went out drinking and doing all the things that every other 16 to 21-year-old does. And then I came to my senses and started dipping my toe in again to this work and developing myself physically and getting myself back on track. And after a few years of doing that and recentering again, I think I was like, this is really, something that can transform lives genuinely. And I think it's quite misunderstood. I don't necessarily think that everyone is exposed to lots of different approaches to meditation, which has a huge impact and a huge difference. Many people come through avenues of like apps and things, which are great, they're perfect entry points, but they kind of have a limit on them as to how
Mm.
far they will take you. And many people are a bit lost after that. They might not want to go down the route of like Buddhism, which is like a classic way you'd learn meditation. So people don't really have a point, anywhere to go from there. And I felt like I had the answers for those people, or I had the tools that could help those people. So I started to realize that a bit more in my mid 20s. And I think, like a lot of these things, it was a seed that came from somewhere and it just grew and grew to the point where I was like pretty hell bent on, teaching as many people as possible, which is fortunately how it sort of unraveled. It's developing more and more. But yeah, I'm in a nice position now.
Yeah, and valuable and powerful and impactful work. And so you said about the different styles of meditation. I've been one of those people that has jumped around somewhat. Uh,
Mhm.
I breath meditation's been my go-to, following my
Mhm.
breath in my belly, sometimes the tip of my nose. I've done, I did mantra meditation, but my wife, who is energetically in many ways more powerful than I am, and we'll get onto this, I'm sure, because she's um, had several out of body experiences and
Mhm.
astral projection and all those kind of things. And we used to meditate, and my hands would open while her head would be on the ceiling, her body would have disappeared, and I just felt very inadequate next to her. So I came back to that. And then really for me, I think the thing that did precipitate the shift, at least in a kind of cause and effect, looking back in that way was for me self-inquiry, was
Mhm.
working with phrases like "Who am I?" So, which of the meditative paths do you tend to be drawn to the most? How do you work in that way?
It's a good question. I would say that I've had a unique journey with meditation in that I've been in a kind of student master relationship all of my life. So my dad was the person that got me involved and interested and started me off, but I eventually became under the guidance of his teacher. So I guess it's quite a traditional way of working where you'd work with a teacher who is considered a master, and they would guide you and they would pretty much determine you need to be doing this now, you need to be doing that now. And they would almost walk you through where you need to be going. And the techniques that they would give you would be perfect to what you need to develop at that time. But I think through going through that process and through now seeing lots of other people work with meditation, I can understand and appreciate where people need to refine or tweak their practice. And I often like to liken it to exercise. Some people, they might look at running and they just would have to work their ass off to get good at running because of
Mm.
their body, because of whatever. Doesn't mean they can't, but they'd have to work extra hard. But they might hop on a bike and just click with the bike, and the bike is like, oh, yeah, this is easy. And both of those things are just tools that are taking you to more, in this meditative space, more clarity, in the same way that a bike or running is taking you to greater fitness levels. So the tool has to harmonize and resonate with you on various different levels. And a bit of experimentation is needed to do that. And this is where the guidance is really, really helpful, because it's really hard when you're starting out to know whether you're just giving up because your mind's, giving you a load of stick, or whether you just need to work through it. These kinds of roadblocks and challenges, you'll face hundreds of them over the years, all sorts of different things. And understanding whether it is just your mind kicking up, or whether it is something that, you can work through. Either you will gain by yourself with your own experience, or someone will help you to figure it out. But I tend to recommend to people, work on a technique. Start off, work on a technique for perhaps 3 months, unless it's like really giving you a problem. And over that 3 months, you should notice some improvement, some shift. It should become easier for you. If it's not, and you're still like banging your head against a wall, perhaps then it's time to shift. Or depending on what the problem is, it might be that you need to tweak something around the practice. It might be that the way you're sitting isn't good. It might be your hands are in the wrong position. It might be you're not breathing right. So there's lots of ways that you need to start to like bring things into alignment. And that alignment is specific to you,
Mm.
not just a framework that you've got to fit into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That 12 weeks is a great length of time. In 2018, I did the John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness-based stress reduction course,
Mm-hmm.
where we were meditating 45 minutes a day, and I really threw myself into that, and that was 12 weeks. I think the one I resonated most with probably actually was the body scan. And certainly I remember by the end, my wife and I, she won't mind me saying, were doing a bit of couples therapy at the time. And I remember being just so sensitive to the, let's say, the rise of sensation if I was triggered in a moment. I
Mm-hmm.
was so attuned that I was able to spot it. And I remember at the end, actually, she said to me, we haven't had an argument in 12 weeks or something like that, or 2 months or whatever it was. And so, yeah, I was just reflecting on that 12 weeks. Yes, absolutely. If you're
Mm-hmm.
really consistent, that was certainly the case for me. I could notice a very tangible difference in
Mm-hmm.
that period of time. And I think from brain scans, in neuroplasticity and that kind of thing, 12 weeks, you definitely should see some difference.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice amount of time. It gives you like a block where you can sort of devote yourself to it, because it is the sort of practice that you can't just be dipping your toe in, because you won't last 5 minutes if you just like, I'll just give it a little go. You might start off like that, but you quite quickly need to like be determined with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember doing. I went on a course once, and they had 3 1-hour periods, which they called aditana, which was like strong determination. There were lots of meditations throughout the day, but for those 3-hour blocks, that was the focus, and it made a massive difference to me going in with that mentality of like quite a strict, disciplined approach. Now that wouldn't suit everyone. For me, for whatever reason, that I quite enjoyed that and I got a lot out of it. But just the fact of like throwing yourself in properly and really being like single-minded with this work, that makes a big difference.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
makes a really big difference.
Yeah. I spoke to a guy who's refused to come on the podcast, actually, called Vern. But he was meditating on the tip of his nose.
Hmm.
And he did a really clever thing, which he gamified it. So his whole thing was, it was like he wasn't getting frustrated, because he just saw it as almost like a computer game to get to the end of. Anyway, long story short, he went through like all 10 or however many there are jhanas without having a
Yeah.
clue what was going on. And so I think that really speaks to what you just mentioned there, that if you can really harness the power of focus and determination, and make it interesting, so there's perhaps not that resistance, I mean, you can experience clearly some pretty profound things. So which begs the question, what sort of profound things have you experienced through your meditative practice?
Lots over the years. Lots over the years, but equally lots of blocks of no experiences. So as I talk about this, I don't want to give the impression off that meditation is all flashing lights, because there are many periods of just not much going on. But well, there is lots going on, but you're not experiencing lots. Um, yeah, the most significant experience that I ever had was actually on that course that I was mentioning, and it was a Vipassana course. But I went on the course with really just the need or the desire to isolate myself, take myself away from work, family, friends, and things, and just like really throw myself into my spiritual work, really. And I actually, although it's not advised, and I wouldn't suggest doing this to other people, I didn't really follow the Vipassana technique much, because I was really there to work on what I was already using, because it was working for me and I wanted to just dive into it more. The Vipassana stuff's great. It's not like I didn't rate it. I just knew what I wanted to work on already. So I went there and just threw myself in, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. And when I got to about day 7, I was finding myself just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, to the point where I would meditate for like an hour, and my mind had never really been that still before. It was so ridiculously still by the day 7 point. And the final but one meditation of that day, I sat down and I just started following the breath at the nose, as you mentioned there. And I started to I had my hands in a mudra, and I started to notice that my fingers were flickering. Before this, actually, my mind was just so incredibly still, it was ridiculous. And I felt a tingling sort of itch on the tip of my nose, and my fingers started to twitch, my eyelids started to twitch, and I felt this enormous energy build up, and it almost felt like it was working against a blockage. And
Mm.
it just, at a certain point, it just felt like an explosion, basically, of energy, which just poured through my body, and it felt like it was going through a pipeline. Electricity, energy,
Yeah.
and as it had happened, as that process had unfolded and was unfolding, my body just slowly but surely went completely invisible, in as much as I had zero awareness of it, as if I had been given a general anesthetic, completely gone, and my consciousness had opened up, and I had then all of this took place over the space of like 10 seconds. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
break it
Yeah.
down, but
Yeah.
10 seconds, this all had unfolded. And the next minute, I'd shot out of the top of my body and was traveling through different planes. So it felt as though, as I was rising up, I was taking off a layer of clothing and really just vibrating quicker, is probably the only way I could describe it, or
Mm.
becoming purer. Um, Hard to describe. It's funny, I've just looked at my clock. It's 2:22. Literally on the digital clock there.
Mate, I know, it cracks me up
Um,
that.
and yeah, I was just becoming purer and purer, is the only way I could put it. And this lasted for the entire meditation, but I can't describe the amount of electricity pouring off my hands.
Mm.
And that same amount of energy was pouring off of my hands for the next 3 days. And I could
Mm.
enter that state of meditation for the next probably 3 or 4 days. Every time went to meditate, I would sit down, tune into the breath, and within what felt like no time, 30 seconds or something, I would be gone. And I had so much time to work on this, because it was a course where we were meditating for 10 hours a day. I would, I had to like practice, as ridiculous as it sounds, I had to practice coming back into my body slowly, because I was coming back into my body with such a jolt, and there were like 100 people sat around me in complete silence, and I couldn't also talk to anyone and tell anyone what was going on. So I was having to practice coming back into my body slowly, and then tune in and come out again. It was just craziness, but it gave me a lot of, well, complete certainty on certain things which I had understood theoretically.
Mm.
Things that get thrown around a lot with spiritual beings. Well, yeah, I had a deep sense of that, personally, but I knew it without any question after that,
Yeah.
because I'd had the experience So it didn't matter who said to me we're not. I know we are, because of and for that it was really helpful. And from a teaching point of view, to be able to speak with like conviction about these certain things like this, with you are a spiritual being. This
Yeah.
body, it is a host. It sounds pretty mad, but it is just a host. It's an amazing host, but don't get too attached to it, because you're much more than that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying by any means that where I got to was the final. There's much to go, I'm sure, but it definitely gave me a hell of a lot of clarity and certainty,
Yeah.
and it was profound, really,
Yeah.
really profound.
Sounds it. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, so this is the first interview I've done since going on a retreat where I had a kensho, a spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm,
And like you said, I have been really hyper focused on non-duality, spirituality for a long time. And I had no doubt that, I could tune into non-duality, as it were.
mhm,
However, the shift that happened for me was seeing very clearly the illusion of non-separation, seeing very clearly, to quote, there's a good article, like, I am that. And not just I am
mhm,
that, there is just that. And I mean everything, pens, like, it was profound. And it had gone from, let's say, 98% certainty to knowing it in the depth of my
mhm,
bones. And as you say, like, really experiencing something like that directly, like what you have, or
mhm.
what I did recently, it is incredibly humbling and incredibly beautiful, incredibly powerful. But having that certainty, as you said,
Mm,
really, like, knowing rather than believing to a certain degree,
yeah,
knowing is an absolute game changer.
really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is. And I think you put it perfectly, where when you said it humbles you. And from over the years, I've come to realize that the genuine experiences are the ones that deeply humble you.
Mm.
I came out of that not feeling special by any means. I came out of it actually in a positive sense, and this might not make sense, but I felt like that big,
Mm.
in as much as you know yourself. Not to say that I knew myself as everything, but you understand that you're everything, but that this is nothing, in as much as it's
Yeah,
not anything lasting. It's hard to articulate, but
it is.
I felt just incredibly humbled by the experience. And I think they are key markers that you've had something genuine,
Mhm.
when, rather than coming out and feeling elevated and a sense of being beyond and above everything. That's
Yeah.
that's not perhaps the best way to take it, but
Absolutely. I mean, that's such an important and key point, is that I think that it's quite easy to seek enlightenment or, higher spiritual insights with a subtle view of, oh, then I will be special.
Mm,
But the paradox is that the more you access that, you can't claim it, because it's so clear it's not personal.
yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing, right? Is, I mean, the way I saw it is, yeah, like, I mean, actually, the, the Simon, like, I'm quite fond of Simon. This sounds ridiculous saying it like this, but at the same time, it's really a mask, and so it can't be claimed. So it is paradoxically at the same time kind of mundane and normal,
Mm,
um, whilst at the same time being utterly, I mean, just completely transformative. But you
mhm,
can't claim it. That if I think if you're claiming it personally, then that's actually a sign that it's not quite the real thing, if you know what I mean.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, I sometimes like to picture it like a bit of a triangle, in that you're the triangle's one. There's no separation with the triangle. But whilst you're journeying, let's say, you're using the tools of meditation or whatever your particular methods are, to this point at the top where you come to realize that you were already one with everything
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Yeah.
The tools are necessary to get to that point of knowing, but it was all the same. It's always been the same. If that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of funny.
It is kind of, well, I mean, look, so I got this little fella. It's the cosmic joke, right? It's
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
as you say, like the tools were necessary to get you there. Um, but ultimately, from the absolute level, there's no one doing it, and it was the universe doing it the whole time anyway, and we're all
Yeah.
one. I mean, that is the paradox. But then you sort of have to come back, and as you say, like the tools are necessary to get you on the way. But anyway, I think it's
Yeah.
important we don't. It's very easy, I think, to stay at this level. But another thing that I value about what you talk about, and this is, I think, has been the essence of my approach for a long time, even before I went through this recent shift, which is that a lot of people approach spiritual practice from the point of view of, I do that on a cushion, for example, in meditation, but the rest of my life is non-spiritual, as it were.
Mm.
Whereas I think, life is a one big meditation, right? In that,
Mhm.
it's embodying this understanding or insight or recognition as best you can. Like, to me, it's taking it off the cushion and into everyday life, into your patterns, into the way you relate, into the way you show up, into the way you set boundaries, or whatever it might
Mhm.
be. That to me is certainly been, and that's what I try and share, is that to me is where the real spiritual rubber meets the road.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's it can very easily stay in the meditation room, and all of the things that should bleed into the rest of your day and actually affect everything about your day, can quite easily stay in that room. But I was talking to a student the other day actually, and we were talking about detachment and how with the process of meditation, you naturally, depending on what method you're doing, obviously, but naturally, most of the time, you're disregarding your thoughts. You're not paying attention to your thoughts. You're paying attention to whatever the object is. So you become naturally, over time, very good at letting go and detaching from things, but not in a forceful way, and just that's how you are. And that bleeds into daily life in a really valuable way. Such a valuable way where someone might cut you up and the old habit of getting angry might kick in, but nothing's as sticky as it once was.
Mm,
You've got this freedom about you, a bit more so, even if it's like 10, 20, 30% more than you used to have. And the value that that has in your daily life is huge when you add it all up. But you do have to also be conscious about these things.
mm,
And like you say, if you're just stepping out of the room, stepping into normal ways of being and considering life not spiritual, you're missing the point, because there's a link to be made between each session, if you want to look at it like that, each day. And there's a lot of work that you can be doing in that link. I teach a lot of mantra, prayer, looking at everything, as you mentioned with your pen, consciously looking at things and actually contemplating the idea that this glass of water is actually me.
yeah,
You
and
know,
it is.
because it is. It is. Yeah. The same energy that makes up that is the same energy that makes up everything. This makes up your body, that makes up, and we don't see it like that. But contemplating these things, as ridiculous as it may sound, you can be doing this type of work all through your day. Just a minute here and there whilst you've got a cup of tea, making a cup of tea, or you can integrate spiritual contemplation and communion all throughout your day, and that's amazingly powerful. That is really where the work is, I would say.
Completely agree. Yeah, and you said we can't see that as us, but actually, I'd suggest that there is, when a moment comes when you do see it as yourself, and I mean literally that
Yeah.
that that is a very special, powerful, an important moment. And but you mentioned about watching the object of meditation and your capacity to be able to recognize it and not get lost in it. And I think that's really something I've tried to emphasize when I work with people, is that um, when you get triggered or when something shows up, your capacity to be able to observe it, particularly feelings that show up in the body, feeling
Mm,
of I'm being attacked, or fear, or whatever it may be, your ability to observe that without getting lost in it and without
mm,
going into your conditioned habitual patterns. Every time you do that, every time you are observing whatever is going on in that way, and not reacting, you are loosening the ego structure a little bit. It might not necessarily feel like that, and it can be a little uncomfortable, but that, to me, that's bringing the power of meditation into everyday life. And I think
mhm,
people underestimate how powerful that is. A bit like what you said earlier, it's, in meditation, it might not feel like much is going on, but actually there's a lot going on in the background. Or
mhm.
hitting a rock 99 times and on the 100th time it breaks. You never know that each of these little moments of observing and not getting lost and not being swept up in ego patterns, you never quite know which one's going to go bang.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, big time. There's a lot of knots within all of us that it's loosening, and as you say, some point in time they undo, and you feel a sense of lightness or freedom just in the sense that you might not be so attached to a person or a thing or situation as you once were, and that gives you a lot of freedom. There's so many aspects to it. It's so complex, but yeah, it's on such a level that we're not always noticing. It's like sometimes I talk about it like tectonic plates. There's movement under the surface, and sometimes you might get like a volcano created, like a beautiful experience, but a lot of the work is just in the shifts that are happening that you're not always aware of, and just that process of making time each day, sitting
Mm,
down, and doing it with a simple aspiration to want to understand more, not forcing it necessarily, but actually having an aspiration to want to understand yourself or the universe or whatever more. And that's key.
mm. So that intention, the power of intention, is what you're talking about, right?
Massive.
Mm,
Power of intention is massive. And I think that where meditation can become complicated for people is it's so paradoxical in that it's an effort and a non-effort. It's striving but not striving too much. It's this balance, but you do need direction. You do need that intent of like a purpose behind it. Either the purpose being to understand yourself, reality, the meaning of life, whatever it is for you, having that driving force, and when you sit down being open to that makes a massive difference.
If you resonate with what I share about awakening, self inquiry, and emotional honesty, I want to share a few words about my coaching. I work with people one to one who are drawn to this path of waking up, growing up, and cleaning up, as they say, through deep presence, through self inquiry, through emotional inquiry. I meet people where they're at, and deep transformation is absolutely possible. Now, I've been quietly growing this side of my work, and sessions are filling up fast. So I may have to soon phase out consultations, particularly with the group work and the retreats I'm going to be focusing on in 2026. But if this speaks to you, book a consultation via the link down below. Let's meet, let's talk, and let's see if I can help. What does your daily meditative practice look like now?
It's generally twice a day, so morning, evening, roughly an hour each time.
Wow.
uh, I'm back to again. This is having still working with my teacher after all this time. I'm recently coming back to working just with the breath. For a while, I was so my I suppose my path is that I follow Krishna as a deity. So my way, my method, and this isn't what I expect my students to follow. Everyone's unique. Is that I follow Krishna, and Krishna to me is like a representation of the divine. So some people prefer to go through pure consciousness or the divine or whichever way. I use Krishna because I like to be able to visualize the form. And so for a while, I'd visualize the form and I'd meditate on the form and I'd feel incredible amounts of light and energy pouring off that form in my mind. And I'd just meditate on that, on his image. Now I've come back to the breath and it's quite nice actually. So it's a very simple practice now, working on the breath morning and evening. But like you say, an ever evolving part of the work is filling my day more and more when I've got like moments of where I'm not doing something that's too thinky, to be able to meditate or mantra or contemplate. And that makes a huge difference, is using that time throughout the day so that the mind's just not just drifting off here, there, and everywhere.
Mm.
You know, you're giving it something centered. If you work with a mantra for half an hour each day, you'd be, I'm not sure if you have before, but you'd be amazed how much of an impact it has
Oh yeah, yeah,
just working with the mantra.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, my wife is the mantra user in the family. I mean, I've know you've have much more experience of astral planes than I do, and so does my wife. So as I mentioned, she she started. We both started mantra meditation roughly around the same time. When was that? Would have been, I don't know, maybe 2019, something like that. And as
Hmm.
I said, she had these experiences of like pretty profound, pretty quick. Um, Alongside that, she's always had sleep paralysis,
Hmm.
and she used to vibrate in bed,
Wow.
and she used to whack me, and I'd be and say, "Stop shaking the bed," and I said, "I'm not shaking the bed." And then we met someone who basically told her, "Oh, that's a sign that you could astral project," which is a
Hmm.
loaded term, but whatever. And our daughter was born, and so she started leaning into those vibrations. And I remember she came in. I was sleeping in the back bedroom because our daughter was in our bed. And she came in. She's like, I've left my body." And anyway, so she's the one, whether it be in meditation or certainly when she's, has those out of body experiences, who's really experienced the astral plane and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. I never have.
Yeah.
So what's your experiences of the astral, and what's your take on it?
My experience of the astral are very limited because every time I've been out of body, I've shot straight through. Um, so the planes that I've been in, the planes that I've been into, I've always struggled to describe them because there's nothing tangible there. There's a plane that you can get to, which I seem to find myself in, which this makes no sense whatsoever. But like we were sort of talking about with the other experiences, or at least alluding to, it's so viscerally real
Yeah.
that it feels. I always say it feels like a downgrade when you come back.
Mm.
It's actually virtually invisible. It's like being in space. Um, the only tangible thing that I experienced when I was there, or the only thing that I could visually talk about when I was actually in this particular plane, was this enormous energy. It felt like the sun, or it looked like the sun, and it was just this vast energy, which made me, when I was saying it, made me feel small. I felt like an ant in front of it, and I felt so utterly humbled and in awe of what I was beneath, or felt like I was beneath. It's the only way I can really perceive it. But the reality of it all was so homely and
Mm.
realistic. And yeah, coming back down to this, although it's physical, you experience it different. It's not physical there, but
Yeah.
it's more real.
Yeah.
I'm lost for words on how to add more context than that.
Is it familiar? A remembrance at all?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's a beautiful upgrade. It's a beautiful upgrade. It's totally unique. You feel just like pure energy.
Mm.
But I think if someone had mentioned this to me before, I wouldn't I wouldn't be able to imagine it. But I would think as though it must feel quite vague and dreamlike, and it's wishy washy. It's not like that at all. It's complete clarity. It's complete. realism. It's visceral, but not in the same sort of physical way that we experience it here,
Mm.
but in a different way that's tangible. It's really hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it's really hard to use words to describe it. But it for me, I see it as I was shown where I'm heading to. Not necessarily the end of where we're heading to, but I was given an insight into this is what you're working towards. This is the purpose of all of the work that you're doing. Keep striving. I like to look at a lot of the things that we experience as being gifts or signals or
Absolutely.
motivators. What you're doing is good. Keep at it. And my teacher always used to say to me, you have to put in to get out.
Mm.
You're not going to be given things freely. Nothing's going to come about without your own time and effort put into it. And it's my experience of that has only been true in that every time I've really dedicated myself. And it doesn't matter if I'm meditating 2 hours a day. If I'm meditating 2 hours a day and I'm just doing it so I can tick the box and crack
Mm.
on with
Yeah.
everything else in my day, there's no meaning to that. There's no value to that. A little bit, obviously, but there's no real depth to that. Whereas if I'm doing it with this pure intent and this aspiration and this openness, things come my way much quicker, and I
Mm.
evolve much quicker. So for me, the meditation process now is just as much about tapping into that. Uh, Emotion might not be the right word, but the feeling and the pure aspiration of, yeah, I want to learn more, I want to grow more. And
Mm.
funnily enough, as well, over time, when my intention shifted a bit more to, I want to grow more so that I can help my students from a more accurate perspective or whatever, things came quicker. Interestingly,
Yeah, that is
it
interesting. Yeah.
became less about so I can evolve and I can, there's always going to be a bit of that naturally, but the more like pure it became,
Yeah.
the more I found I grew
Mm.
and continue to grow.
Yeah. Um, so it's interesting if I compare and contrast, as it were, your path and mine. Um, and there's that saying, isn't there? Like many paths, same destination.
Hmm.
And obviously, you've been very dedicated, and were introduced to meditation very early, doing 2 hours meditation a day. And like for me, it was more, it was suffering was a driver, and then various, it's been a bit more kind of haphazard in some ways.
Hmm.
I think, so when I had my shift, I saw very clearly, as I said, the illusion of separation, no self, and also that sounds corny, but that really love is, for me, awareness was kind of empty and inert before, and it's still empty, but it's the quality of it is loving, is love.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the key thing has prior to that was really committing as best I could to live in accordance with the understanding of loving actions. And
Hmm.
I think it's easy to tell a story in hindsight about, well, I did this and then this and then this and then X, Y, Z happened. But because it's not quite like that. But at the same time, I do feel like that to me has that intention of trying to live in accordance with my loving nature as I understood it to the best of my ability. And
Hmm.
that, for example, meant in terms of relationship stuff or dynamics or my feelings in my body, all the different ways, like
Hmm.
loving myself, loving what is, that intention to be in alignment with our loving nature, that to me seemed to be a real catalyst, and that's certainly what I like to share. So I suppose I suppose a question that could come from that would be, what is your take on walking the talk and living in alignment, for example, as I've said, with our loving nature to the best of our ability?
Mm. I think I completely agree with you. I completely agree that I think the essence of us is love. The essence of us is love, but not the love that we may consider, in lustful interactions and things like that, which is often confused by. But pure love, which means, in my belief of it and understanding, is to give without wanting in return.
100% unconditional. Yeah, yeah.
Unconditional. Yeah. To just act. And basically, when you really dissect that, it's to, if you were to live completely from that place, it's to be selfless, i.e., no
Mm.
self, i.e.,
Hmm.
the fact that everything is you and you are everything. And
Yeah.
so to live by love is to live by who you really are or what you really are.
Mm.
And it's I think it's something naturally that we have to be conscious about doing, because the mind wants to interfere with that, dilute it all the time. So sometimes we need to check in when, you know, I don't know. So, for example, we've been away in Canada for 2 months. It wasn't my interest in going. My partner wanted to go. She's always wanted to spend a bit of time there. I liked it, but it wasn't my thing. I mean, I had a great time, but I wouldn't have chosen to go there. But I had to sit with myself and look at it and think, it's what she wants to do.
Mm.
I'll go with her. I'll, like, support her, sort of thing. There's many times where perhaps I've not been as selfless, and you have to look out for that part where the mind wants to get in and say, well, I want to do this. Or
Mm.
then also, to complicate things further, you do have to you do have to have discernment, and you do
Yes.
have to have boundaries, and you do have to be careful that you're not just becoming walked all over.
Mm.
Because love doesn't mean just to give yourself completely and allow people to dominate you and walk all over you. You know, it has, there are deserve, not deserve. There's boundaries that you have to have, and clarity. And so that's a fine line to walk, and something that you have to, through experience, I think, figure out, and
Mm.
get to, through experimenting a bit perhaps, and understanding yourself and other people, understand a bit more.
Yeah.
But that adds a bit of complication to things.
I think what you've just said is really important, profound, and beautiful, Ben. Yeah, completely. It is that paradox of selfless, but then it can give people the impression of being a walkover, and it's nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
Actually, because I think if you don't have an agenda with other people, then you're not, for example, seeking their approval. And because often we might say yes when we'd rather say no, because we want to people please. So actually there's an element of control there, and it can be quite nuanced, this. And this is absolutely what you just described so well, was absolutely the fundamental aspect of, I think, the work that I've done over the last
Mm.
13 years or so. Was, I mean, I talk about it in terms of learning to stop self-abandoning.
Hmm.
That means, like, to be loving to yourself, and specifically not like an ego, but specifically, let's say, our intuitive sense of what is right from moment to moment. Because I think when
Hmm.
we're young, we learn to, override our natural sense, our natural guidance, and it's coming back in alignment with that. Um, and loving actions can mean, as you said, like, can mean boundaries, can mean saying yes when you want to say no,
Hmm.
or leaving something, a relationship, or whatever it might be. So love is not just, as you said, rolling over and say, I'm
Mm.
selfless, do what you like. Not at all. It's being centered and rooted, whilst at the same time being loving without agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at a parent-child relationship. The parent hopefully loves the child unconditionally, but still sets boundaries and has
Mm.
discipline in the house, and might have little do's and don'ts. And that's not because they're not loving. It's because they know it's right, and they know it's what's necessary and what's needed. It actually might be harder for them sometimes to set boundaries, because they want to give more, but they're like, no, I know I need to, because otherwise they're gonna walk all over me or whatever. So yeah, there always needs to be that sense of balance, and the spiritual discernment. I think naturally, because people become softer when they practice or walk their spiritual path, they know to become more loving. They want to live from kindness and these things, and they can sadly go into that place where they become a walkover. And it's not until they've gone, they've been walked over a few times, that they start to bring themselves back. So it's something to be careful of, for sure.
Yeah. I
Finding
mean,
that balance is tricky.
Yeah, yeah, that's I see that a lot with people. Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
Particularly people who learn early on, as many of us did, through it, that, for example, we learn to put maybe one parent's needs above our own, and therefore we
Mhm.
learn to, be more of an energy giver than having it in balance, as you say. And that can work for a period, and that can look like loving behavior, but it does come at a huge cost, and
Mhm.
invariably energetically. I noticed. And earlier you mentioned Krishna. As you were talking, I was thinking, like, I feel quite attached to Shakti.
Mhm.
I did, before doing ayahuasca 10 years ago. Someone introduced me to DMT. I didn't know what it was,
Mhm.
and the first time I did it, I had that experience a bit like that you described, where my body disappeared, and there I was in another dimension. And Shakti was in front of me, as clear as you are now. Arms all over, and which was kind of startling. Like, that's a really
Wow.
image, yeah, very imprinted on my mind. And but so when I do work with people in a sense of, to stop self-abandoning, for example, and to tune into what your feelings want and your guidance wants in terms of, a loving next step. And people often, I find, and this used to be the case for me too, is, we have feelings that we either have avoided or judged or tried to ignore, or get rid of, any of those things. And so coming towards the feelings is the first step. And then how do we kind of bring a sense of love to that? And I'll often describe or suggest, like, the archetypal loving mother energy,
Mhm.
where, you couldn't do anything wrong. It's just like a big loving hug. And when
Mm.
I always have sort of Shakti in mind when I say that, of this sort of motherly uh, a hug, and bringing that to ourselves to be able to, start that period process of healing here first, and then taking that into the loving actions we want to take, which is
Mm.
just the next step. Basically, it's only ever the next step. I know you
Yeah.
talk about this,
Yeah.
is not getting too far ahead of yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's gotta be little steps, hasn't it? But, I think that's a beautiful way of doing it, by the way. I
Thank
really,
you.
really like that.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, with the, Shakti energy as you speak about, I also, uh, talk a lot about Mother Mira, who's a teacher who's around, who's known as an avatar,
Mm.
and, and that's an interesting thing. But
Yeah.
she's got a beautiful energy about her. If I think everyone's different, and naturally, some people find it easier to connect with the divine or their deepest self through an avatar or a picture of Mother Mira or Krishna or whoever, and they find that they're able to create this amazing relationship. Actually, what they're doing is creating a relationship with themselves or with God through that picture, through that deity as a representation of what they're looking for. But it opens something up in them which they might not have been able to open up without that. It's a gateway in, and for me, that's I've always found that helpful, is having that. But Mother Mira is, funnily enough, quite a simple one that many people are attracted to, because I think, especially, well, I've noticed a lot of my male students are quite drawn to her, which is
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
That
Yeah.
kind of motherly love.
Well, we all want that, and not. I don't know. I know very few people who understandably ever really got that, because, we're all human, and
Mm,
we're raised in human environments. So to have that perfect, as it were, motherly love is incredibly rare. Um, and I wanted to ask you about avatars, actually. So I've heard you talk about this, and you talk about, your teacher being an avatar. So what do you mean by that?
the simplest way I could put it, and it's no easy way of me describing it without it sounding a bit wild, is that we, as I was talking about with this kind of analogy, is that we're working up to this realization of who we are, and
Mm.
this total, you know, awakening moment completely at all times to the truth of the fact that, this glass of water is me, not just momentarily, but complete. 100% 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. complete awareness. So we're kind of journeying, but paradoxically already that it's just veiled in
Yeah.
many programs and God knows what else.
Yeah.
And this human body is just our host, it's our vehicle. So we come to the human body, into the human body, in order to go through this process of learning and experiencing things that we don't normally experience in our normal state. This all the physical experiences that we have are unique to this plane and this body. So it's partly experience, but it's also this evolution of coming back to the realization of who we actually are and what we actually are. So we're journeying, you could say, upward or backward to the truth of who we are. The avatars are direct incarnations of what we are, but always completely aware. They've not gone through the process of evolution. They're not journeying. If you want to look at it as like infinite energy has taken on a body and not gone on a journey or a process, and it's here specifically in a body to be able to interact with other human beings and help other human beings, because it's a tangible way. It's a tangible way that relationships can be formed, that teachings can be shared, that guidance can be given, and it comes directly from the source. So it's unfiltered. It's not a human being who's trying to figure it out, and some of it might be right, some of it might not be. It's come right from the source. So the idea of an avatar the terminology is actually it's a Sanskrit word, and it literally means descent, and it's that idea of the divine or infinite consciousness coming into taking on a human life and a human body, but for the sole purpose of helping humanity to rise up in consciousness and teach. So Krishna was considered an avatar. Mother Meera is someone who's around at the moment who's considered an avatar. And as you say, I've been blessed enough that I've been under or in a close relationship and under the guidance of an avatar. So
Wow.
it's kind of mad,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a lot of people naturally kind of think, "What the hell?" or don't
Yeah.
understand it, and I get that. I get that. I
Of
don't
course.
think I would if someone mentioned it to me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was thinking, if I'd heard this conversation 15 years ago, I would have been like, what the hell is he on about? Not
yeah.
just you, me
Right, we've
too.
got to end the podcast there.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that's a really lovely description. Yeah, the infinite learning to be in the finite to help. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do really. I've said it once already. I love it's. I really appreciate um, that triangle you use, and that we're kind
Mhm.
of it doesn't really matter which side we're on, right? It's to get to that remembrance of who we are,
Yeah.
and I'm very fortunate to speak to people like you, and I've spoken to many people who have seen that, and there are so many paths, and I really love that, and
Mm.
obviously the work you're doing with your meditation, is such a powerful one. And but at the same time, it's not the only one, right? I think that's the really beautiful thing is to really see that there are many ways up. And as you said earlier, even within meditation, it's what resonates and what is right for you.
Mm. Yeah, and it's really important to find what that is for you. And but then when you do find it, I think it's important to dive into that and be quite single-minded with that, unless you really come to a point where you feel like you need to move on to something else. But I do feel like it's spend some time figuring it out and then get it and run with it as your tool. But you're totally right. There's so many different paths, as you've taken to the who am I.
Hmm.
What a beautiful practice, what a beautiful way of
Hmm.
trying to unravel yourself and understand yourself. And it's a great way of doing it. And many people will stick with that question for their life and come to clarity, hopefully.
Hmm.
So, yeah, many, many different paths. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's up to us to have a bit of time, have a look, figure out what works, and really devote yourself to it.
Yeah. And we've spoken a lot about some pretty funky experiences that we've both had. But at the same time, I feel like we have emphasized that, I went, as you as I keep saying, I've been through this shift pretty recently, but my focus hasn't actually changed before or after, insofar as the recognition, and this has come as quite a relief to me, is that it is about, corny as it might sound, is about love. It is about, love is the recognition that separation is an illusion. So whether it be meditating or self-inquiry or whatever, one thing we clearly do absolutely align on in terms of approach is the living in accordance with that. I mean, it naturally happens more as the spiritual path progresses,
Yeah, definitely.
until it's utterly effortless.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's something I try and emphasize. I think there are a lot of teachers out there who talk about, there's nothing you can do, or meditation or self-inquiry is the only thing. But for me, really, it's if you were going to only do one thing, it would be, for me, try and live in accordance as best you can with your loving nature, which, as you said earlier, that's not just being a pushover, but tuning into we all have this internal guidance, tuning back into it and living as best you can from that place, even when it's hard. And that, to me, has been the most important thing. And I appreciate that within all our peak experience chat, that has also been emphasized by both of us.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you were as a person who's exploring this only to do one thing, living in accordance to love is the thing that's going to take you
Hmm.
to what you're looking for. Because that is, it does sound so corny as you say, but that is what we're all looking for, knowingly or unknowingly. And when that starts to emerge more, and it might emerge in meditation, it might emerge when you're doing some work in daily life. When it genuinely emerges, it's incredible. I mean, the love that I've felt sometimes in meditation is beyond anything I've ever experienced in this life. There's nothing in this life could give me that sense of love that I've had in moments in meditation. And it emerges more and more. It becomes more familiar. You become more, I think, just aware of it and able to tap into it and live more by it. It's all very hard sometimes to articulate, and I think as you step along, things become clearer
Hmm.
for you. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, no, and you put it beautifully there. I think that you're right. Love is what we want. Some people say happiness. I prefer love,
Hmm.
because I think that really reflects the non-separation aspect so clearly. And then, as you said earlier, in terms of lustful or romantic love, we tend to think, oh, it's something someone else can give us. But actually, no, as you found with meditation, and as I've absolutely found as well, love is our nature. Like,
Yeah.
it really is. Love is not out there. Love is who we are. And it's just about clearing the filters to that. And it can
Mm.
become so palpable. I mean, it's even, it can almost be overwhelming in its intensity. But
It
I think
can. It can.
just noticing it's not out there, it's who you are, and the spiritual path is clearing the path for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. No, it's a good perspective. And like, I spent a long time in my early 20s doing lots of like really hard endurance racing and really hard physical stuff. And I thought I was quite tough. I wasn't. I thought I was. And I've been through periods, even recent ones actually, where most times that I would sit down to meditate, I would actually be quite teary because of the amount of love that I was feeling
Mm.
day after day, from a joyful place, not sad, not nothing like that. Just like you say, overwhelming amounts of love. And when you look around and you see lots of people struggling with peace of mind and just being happy in themselves, this is like a real motivator for me to help people and to
Yeah.
just encourage people to look along these lines in whatever way suits them and be like, it is there for you. It's genuinely there for you. You're gonna have to work at it. It's not probably not going to come immediately. You will have to put the work in, but you can change and you can tap into something within you that is pretty amazing to experience, and genuinely transform yourself. It all sounds very up in the clouds, but it's real. It is
Yeah.
real.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a beautiful intention. And I think that's a beautiful place to leave it, Ben. I've thoroughly enjoyed spending time with you. And I love, as I've already said, how we emphasize the same thing, but at the same time have come really from different parts. And I think I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. So thank you so much for coming on. And I very much hope we stay in touch, and I feel we will. So thank you, Ben.
Thanks so much. Cheers.